It is worth bearing in mind that, as the Business Secretary said on Monday, she asked Henry Staunton to step down after serious concerns were raised. But this is, on a matter of substance, one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our nation's history, because people who were working hard serving their communities had their lives and reputations destroyed, and that's why we are working hard to ensure that they get justice and compensation, and that's why we established Sir Win Williams' inquiry. It's why we've already paid out over £150 million of compensation to almost 3,000 victims, and it's why we will introduce new legislation shortly to exonerate those. We will make sure that we do what is needed, that the truth does come to light, we right the wrongs of the past, and crucially, that victims get the justice that they deserve.
Again, I mean, I feel like we're in Keir Starmer barrister mode here.
Yes, and he seems to want to legislate the detail of it, which is difficult publicly because the detail is complicated, and it's also not going to get you a very interesting answer in the chamber. And Sunak is very much in, I hear what you say, brackets, I know she's a nightmare as well, but I don't want to talk about it. So what I'm going to talk about at, frankly, quite great length is the actual substance of the issue and how we're going to deal with this and the miscarriage of justice. And, you know, perhaps he hopes if he talks for a very long time that he'll take the steam out of it and use up a large proportion of his time in PMQs. But yeah, this is one where Starmer is sort of nipping at his heels like a little Jack Russell, and Sunak sort of kicking his leg in a kind of trying not to kick too hard, but in a sort of I've got this other Jack Russell on my other leg. You better think about that, old son.
I mean, because clearly, whatever the rights and wrongs that Kerry Baden not think she's operating on, I mean, all this is actually doing is highlighting the fact that the government hasn't paid out this
hasn't paid the money, exactly.
Which, given that that's where the public anger is,
yes,
nobody gives two hoots who Henry Staunton or Kerry Badenoch are. The public want the sub-postmasters wrongfully convicted to get the compensation.
That is correct. And so from that point of view, it sort of works for Starmer, but it's not working rhetorically or in terms of making me excited.
Well, here's something exciting, Tim. The YouTubes are working.
Yay!
Well, now
live
on the
see
YouTubes. They've put another 50p in the meter.
Faces.
So it's somebody said, I see that the MOD are running Times Radio. I think, you know, we briefly went plop in the sea and now we're back and we're up and running.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with the nuclear deterrent.
No,
it's
nothing.
all very reliable.
It's all completely...
It
briefly didn't work, but now it is working.
But now it does work.
Yeah, it's completely fine. Very good. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I do hope the Prime Minister will instigate that investigation into what was said on Monday, because one of the features of this miscarriage is that where concerns have been raised, they've been pushed to one side. And this week we also learned that a 2016 investigation into whether Post Office branch accounts could be altered was suddenly stopped before it was completed. Now, had that investigation revealed that they could be altered, which we now know to be the case, the livelihoods of those wrongly prosecuted could have been saved. What did government ministers know about it at the time?
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has picked one particular date, but it is worth bearing in mind that this scandal has unfolded over decades, Mr. Speaker, and it was actually following a landmark 2019 High Court case that the previous government established a statutory inquiry led by Sir Win Williams, which is uncovering exactly what went wrong, Mr. Speaker, and it is right that that inquiry is allowed to do its work. But also, Mr. Speaker, following the High Court case, the government established an independent advisory board, established not one but 3 different compensation schemes, and as of now, over 2/3 of people have received full and final offers, because what we are focused on is making sure that the victims get the justice and the compensation that they deserve.
Right. Just when we thought it couldn't get any knottier, Keir Starmer's saying, I noticed he hasn't said that he'll instigate that investigation into what was said on Monday.
Well, that was off the back of the previous question. And then we dive further into the depths and the weeds with who knew what. And again, the question was, what did ministers know about this? I mean,
We know what ministers know. It came out, was it yesterday or the day before?
Yes, but it's also not something where you're going to get a sort of useful answer, is it?
No.
You either know what they knew and you're just trying to sort of embarrass them, or you don't know what they knew and they're not going to tell you. Sort of pointless, open-ended question, really. And given that there's quite a lot to go at, this seems like
it's a very low.
It's a bit niche,
energy.
isn't it?
So this was the story that the BBC revealed that David Cameron's government knew the Post Office had dropped the secret investigation that might have helped the wrongfully accused postmasters prove their innocence earlier, because this is the whole idea of could you go into the back of the Horizon IT system. Rishi Sunak talked about the previous government in 2019. I think, was that the one when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer?
That'd be the one.
Yeah. And then he talked about not one but three different compensation schemes, as if that was a good thing. We've got not one but three. Whereas actually the sub-postmasters have complained that actually
they just want one.
They just want one, and they just want it to pay
some
out
money. Yeah.
But apart from that, I mean, weirdly knotty questions producing underwhelming answers.
That's where we are so far.
You had such high hopes, Tim.
This is the half time, though.
Yeah, that's true.
And let's hope it's a game of two
halves.
halves.
The big gear shift is about to take place.
Well, it might be.
Yeah.
I got this sense of a sort of valedictory tone from Starmer there. Maybe he's just trying to win some brownie points with his front bench, and now he'll come out swinging. Maybe.
Somebody says, Simon on the YouTube says, think Matt and Tim might be missing the point. This is a way for Starmer to take out not just Sunak, but his likely successor, Badenoch. Doesn't take us out. I mean, telling everyone to sleep is probably more. If I'm not sure he's managed to do that. Is it? Well, it's a good point. You could go after Cammy Badenoch, but I don't feel like she's harmed.
I think I'll have plenty of opportunities to do that.
No careers have yet been harmed in the making of this PMQ. So let's go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this information about 2016 has just come to light, I think, this week, which is precisely why I'm asking about it. Exactly. Considering the Prime Minister's Foreign Secretary was running the government in 2016, and one of the Prime Minister's current Cabinet Office ministers was the Post Office Minister, has he thought to ask either of them what they knew in 2016?
No, Mr. Speaker. We did the right thing, which was to set up an independent statutory inquiry. That is the right way to resolve this issue. It's the right way to get victims the truth and the answers they demand. But this government is getting them the compensation that they rightly deserve.
Well, there's an interesting question about that as to whether or not they are getting on with getting the compensation.
I mean, Starmer did sort of. He got a minor concession there, didn't he?
Yeah.
Have you asked David Cameron about all of this? No, I've left that to the statutory inquiry. So it was one of those sentences where the big reveal was sort of. Sunak just went no, and then blah 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 blah. But the no was quite important.
Who was the Cabinet Office Minister? The current Cabinet Office Minister who was the Post Office Minister and is now at the Cabinet Office? That's a good pub quiz question.
It is, and
I can't.
I was fearful you were going to ask that.
Who could it be?
Honest.
Sunak, Dowden.
Could have been Dowden, I guess.
Dowden, John Glenn, Johnny Mercer. Could be any number of them. Steve Baker, Nusrat Ghani, Esther McVeigh. I think Esther McVeigh. She was certainly at business, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Let us know. I mean, this is a good. While away the time. If you think you know who was the Post Office Minister at the time is now at the Cabinet Office. You can WhatsApp us 0333 003 2353. The fun just keeps on coming. Let's go back to the House of Commons, question number 5.
Mr. Speaker, as we all know, the Horizon scandal left people isolated, their livelihoods lost, their lives ruined. Some died without ever getting the justice that they deserved. Fears of delay, Prime Minister, or cover-up are causing them anguish. And yesterday, Chris Head, once accused by the Post Office of owing more than £80,000, he said this yesterday: there is a lack of transparency. We need to see the correspondence between the Post Office, the Department and UKGI, because all of the time everything gets shrouded in secrecy. This is his words. Have some respect, please. He's a victim. Now, I appreciate the inquiry is ongoing, but as the Prime Minister knows, and so do I, so does the whole House, that does not provide a reason why he can't draw a line under this, give postmasters like Chris the peace of mind they need, and release all of the correspondence that he wants to see. Will he now do so?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, this is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our country's history. I don't think that the Leader of the Opposition ever raised with me over these exchanges over the past year. But we are working hard to get victims not just the answers, but the compensation they deserve. But we do now have a statutory inquiry led by Sir Win Williams, who has the powers to get access to all the documentation that he requires, speak to everybody that he needs to. That is the right and proper way to get the truth that the victims deserve. But in the meantime, we are not wasting a moment to get victims the compensation they deserve, and the legislation will be before the House shortly.
I mean, we need to raise our energy here because they're not. We can't expect people to listen to this and say that this is... Look, this is a very exciting deep dive into a very important public issue.
Yeah.
But it is not what I was expecting.
No, of all the things.
And
within the last 7 days, Britain went into recession.
Correct. Well, we learnt that...
We learnt it was...
We
found
learned that Britain had gone into recession in the last 6 months.
The governing party's lost 2 by-elections.
Correct.
There's another one coming because of an MP who wanted to sell cash for questions.
And the Leader of the Opposition has done a massive U-turn on one of his central policies and has suffered huge embarrassment.
Which policy are we talking about here? Gaza.
Well, I meant on the net zero.
Oh, net zero. Yeah,
net zero, and then is under huge pressure on Gaza, partly as a response to things that the candidate he's got in another winnable by-election said, and has now been disowned. And we've heard none of any of this, which is somewhat curious. And if I'm Sunak, I'm sitting there with probably 5 punchy answers to Keir Starmer, and I've not been able to use any of them. Maybe that's the point. Maybe this is the genius of Starmer's approach.
Just make no news.
Make no news.
Render yourself completely irrelevant to the national conversation.
And do not give Sunak any opportunity to land any blows on any of the stuff that he's presumably absolutely champing at the bit to do. I completely changed my mind. This is genius from Starmer.
Mike says, PMQs featuring Sunak and Starmer typically dry affairs, but even by their standards, this is on the dry side.
This is desiccated.
I've got one bit of news. I've worked out who the minister was. Was the Post Office Minister in 2016, now at the Cabinet Office, Baroness Neville Rolfe.
But of course, Pauline Neville Rolfe. There you go, see? Embarrassed not to know who it was.
Used to work for Tesco's, did she?
Yeah.
There we are.
Well, there we go, Britain.
Right.
Bet you're glad you tuned in now.
So good to have you back, Tim. Right, with a sense of grim inevitability, let's go back to the House of Commons. Don't worry, it'll all be over soon. This is question number 6.
But how can Sunak turn a banal question into a punchy counter-attacking answer on all the stuff?
I think he's going to say, this is just typical of him. I've already told him there's nothing to this.
Yes.
Why hasn't he asked me about this? Why hasn't he asked me about that? Because he's all over the place, he doesn't have a plan, and he would take us back to square one. Let's go back to the Commons. It's question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
In recent decades, there have been numerous scandals that have left shaken public faith in our institutions, and rebuilding that confidence will require those affected to see that politicians are being honest with them and to believe it. Just like the postmasters, victims of the infected blood scandal have been subject to unimaginable trauma during their search for justice. So can the Prime Minister put their minds at ease and tell the House what undertakings he has made to ensure the government is not limping to the election on payments that they are owed by the British state?
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the inflected blood scandal, as I've said before, I'm acutely aware of the strength of feeling on this issue and the suffering of all those who were impacted by this dreadful scandal. I gave evidence to the inquiry myself last year, and as I said then, I recognise that thousands have suffered for decades. As he knows, there is an independent inquiry. The Minister for the Cabinet Office, because this is an incredibly complex issue, as he well knows, updated Parliament with the latest government position just before the Christmas recess, announced that the Cabinet Office was appointing an expert group of clinical, legal and social care experts, so it had the relevant expertise to make informed decisions responding to the inquiry's recommendations on compensation when they come, and confirmed that the Department for Health will implement a fully bespoke psychological service for people infected and affected. We have also committed to providing an update to Parliament on next steps through an oral statement within 25 sitting days of the publication of the final report. But I'll end where I began. This is a deeply awful scandal, and we will do what we need to make it right.
Don't really know what to make of all that, really.
Well, I mean,
it's an important point.
A perfectly competent answer and apparently relatively heartfelt. But, I mean, I'm just genuinely sort of staggered. I think they must have taken a strategic decision to avoid knockabout. And, you know, people are sort of writing in and saying, you know, does Starmer know something? I mean, we know all sorts of things about both of these scandals, and the money hasn't arrived yet, and that's a problem. But where you would normally expand that as the leader of the opposition is to say, this is a government that's all talk and no trousers, keeps telling us it's doing things when it isn't, and is a sort of shambolically incompetent when it comes to delivery. You could have broadened out the kind of general argument that he's making here into a sort of broader political point.
I thought when he moved on to the blood scar, you could have done a whole thing on compensation schemes.
Yes,
because there was a story in the papers yesterday about the compensation for people in the Navy who were gay and were sacked because of their sexuality. Their due compensation. I was watching on our local
could have done
news.
2 or 3 questions on Postmasters and then just brought in 3 or 4
report
others.
out this week on Windrush and how that compensation scheme isn't working. There was a story, I think, last week on compensation for victims of vaginal mesh. You could put them all together into this.
You said that very quickly, didn't you?
But you could have put them all together into, you know,
quite.
victims here, victims there, victims everywhere, and you're not paying out the money. Because, in the words of one of your own officials, you were dragging your feet in the countdown to an election?
Well, there's that. Or is it because there's no money? Because we went into a recession, Prime Minister.
I do wonder if
there's
you're right,
a
though,
lot of different ways that they could have done this.
One reason for doing this is because Keir Starmer's got as much trouble in his inbox as Rishi Sunak has. His £28 billion, citizens' assemblies we discovered this week came and went in the space of 24 hours. The backbench trouble on the Middle East. That actually, by doing this, what he hasn't done is given Rishi Sunak a free hit.
There's no free hit quotes.
Yeah.
There's nothing all over the TV at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the papers in the morning about any of this, I suspect.
Shall we listen to some of the questions that our listeners wanted to ask?
Yes.
Instead, maybe these would have been better. Where we start? Right, so we've been asking for, if you want to WhatsApp us, 0333 003 2353. That's 0333 003 2353. Send us your WhatsApp voice notes. What would you have asked at PMQs? This is, I now call Dan Stirring.
Dear Prime Minister, please can you hang on calling election till as late as possible so I can afford my children's school fees?
Nice toadying question there from Dan. Very good. Now we call Eddie.
Eddie from the seat of Corby here. I'd like to know what the right diminutive gentleman is going to do about the potholes everywhere. Mate, I can't drive anywhere in this town without falling down the pothole the size of a lorry.
I'd like the word mate to be used more at PMQs.
More often. Yes, the right honourable mate. Well, I'm sure he'd dispatch Jonathan Gullis to look at the potholes. Anyone who follows Twitter will know that there's a lot of pictures of Gullis pointing and staring at potholes. It's one of the best subcultures on Twitter at the moment.
I now call Matt.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. This is Matt from Northumberland. I'd be interested to know, given that the writing is on the wall for the next election, what sort of high-end board-level appointments have you got lined up for yourself post-election?
I mean, you could see a backbench opposition MP doing that, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. That's a sort of Stephen Pound would have asked a question like that back in the day.
What could he say to that?
Well, he could just flannel about.
And then say, well, I'm going to win the election, so it doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Right, very good.
We're here to win. I'm committed to this country. And all rumours that I've been having private conversations with tech bosses in California about running venture capital schemes to do with artificial intelligence are complete nonsense.
There we are. It's
Very
much
specific
better.
load of complete nonsense there. Let's see
whether... this is much better. Listeners asking questions than you pretending what the Prime Minister would reply. I now call Dave.
My question for the Prime Minister is, with all your MPs jumping ship, I wonder if the Prime Minister might consider volunteering for the next lifeboat.
I'm very committed to the people of Richmond, where I love the pork pies, and I can describe in great detail the shops that I go to, frequenting the local community. No plans to go anywhere.
Were they at war with the lifeboats, or was that something that Keir Starmer said? It turned out not to entirely hold water, as it were. I can't remember.
No.
Lifeboats became a culture war thing for 5 minutes. Well, very good. That's I think actually it turns out all of our listeners can ask better questions than the actual leader of the opposition.
Well, then the
apologise.
suspicion must be that the leader of the opposition chose not to ask good questions.
I think that's probably quite right. Phil, this is one of the best WhatsApp so far. Phil says, desperate to think I stopped plumbing a bath to listen to this. Harry says, thank you, Matt. I was so grateful you weren't able to get me into PMQs. Enjoying my walk in the pouring rain much more. So Harry got in touch and said he was in London. Could I get him into PMQs? And I had to explain, well, no, because I'm
not there,
not doing this. And it turns out he's walking in the rain instead. Antonio says, the public say we hate the shouting and yaboo of PMQs. Why can't they just answer the questions? Also, the public, PMQs are so boring. These guys are boring. Where's the shouting and yaboo? It's a good point, but, it's an opportunity for the leader of the opposition to mount a political argument. And he's chosen not to. We can read that what we will. Up next, hopefully the backbench MPs were better. Lara Spirit will bring us the best of the rest. Is PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio.
Download the free Times Radio app and listen to us wherever you are.
The deals keep coming at Currys. How about 10% off Hotpoint built-in appliances over $249? Like the Hotpoint Class 4 stainless steel electric oven with multi-flow technology that spreads heat evenly into every corner. So there's no worries about your pies being burnt on the outside and raw in the middle. And with an A+ energy rating, it won't burn a hole in your pocket either. In-store and online at Currys. Offer ends 6th of March 2024. Use code HOTIND10 for discount.
Introducing the McSpicy and Frank's Red Hot Burger, featuring irresistible Frank's Red Hot Mayo, jalapenos, cheese, and our mouth-watering crispy, spicy coated chicken. You lot ain't ready for this one.
McSpicy and Frank's Red Hot, the hottest drop of the year. Until 12th of March from 11 a.m, subject to availability. Frank's Red Hot bottle not available at McDonald's.
Matt Chorley on Times Radio with Revolut. The future of money is here. Download the app for free now. 18+, terms and conditions apply.
Very good afternoon. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio. In association with Revolut, you can download the free app. 18+ terms and conditions apply. Tim Shipman, you got it wrong. It's Lucy Neville Rolfe, not Pauline.
Oh, there is a Pauline Neville Rolfe, though, isn't there?
Well,
there's a Pauline Neville Jones.
Ah, you've got your Lady Nevilles modelled up.
I've got them. I'm in the right pickle. Apologies, listeners.
There we are. It's good. It's good to keep things accurate. Adam says my tropical fish have more direction and purpose than this lot. Says
I hope that refers to the politicians rather than the analysts.
And then Howie says, I'm absolutely convinced that Keir Starmer is determined to eliminate PMQs in the public consciousness. He's so utterly boring and useless at it, he's ruining it for me. But don't worry, though. Don't worry. It's not just all about Keir Starmer. We've got the backbench questions, the best of the rest. Lara Spirit is here. What was it like, Lara?
It was brilliant.
Yay!
Ish.
Come on, bring some energy.
Come on, let's bring some energy. We were feeling very lethargic. I feel like I've just had a big roast and crumble. That's the sort of level of energy I'm at.
It wasn't that good, though, was it?
No, I mean, no, that's true. Yeah,
I feel like we've been robbed of a batter pudding this morning.
Lara, where are we going first?
We are going, unsurprisingly, to Stephen Flynn, SNP Westminster leader. This is his second question, unsurprisingly, on this question of a ceasefire in Gaza.
Right. Mr. Speaker, tonight this House will have the opportunity to join with the majority of the international community and say that enough is enough, that the killing in Gaza must stop and that the hostages must be released. And the best way to do that is to send a clear and united message that we back an immediate ceasefire. Surely all of us irrespective of our political allegiance, can agree on that very issue.
Mr. Speaker, of course we want to see the fighting in Gaza end as soon as possible and never again allow Hamas to carry out the appalling terrorist attacks that Israel was subject to. But he talks about the UN resolution, but just calling for an immediate full ceasefire now, which collapses back into fighting within days or weeks, is not in anyone's interest, Mr. Speaker. We must work towards a permanent ceasefire, and that's why the right approach is the approach that we've set out and the United States have set out in their resolution, which is for an immediate humanitarian pause to get hostages out and aid in so that we then can create the conditions for a sustainable ceasefire. And in the meantime, we're doing everything we can to increase the amount of humanitarian aid that we bring into Gaza, something I discussed with the King of Jordan last week, and we will have more updates in the coming days of more airdrops into Gaza, but also just in the last couple of days have managed to deliver family tents into Gaza, which are providing much needed shelter for very vulnerable people.
So, quite a lot of words there from Rishi Sunak, but actually making the more substantive point that whatever happens in the House of Commons tonight is not going to change the situation on the ground, where things are terrible for both the Israeli hostages and millions of people who live in Gaza.
And I think setting out the government position in a bit more detail, that defence against calling for an immediate ceasefire on the grounds that anything that collapses back into infighting, in his words, within days or weeks is not in anyone's interest. I think listening to that will have been, of course, Keir Starmer, who is known to have been resistant to changing Labour's position, to diverging from the government's position and now presenting a divided front to Western allies. So I think having Rishi Sunak state it in the House there, I think, will focus some minds.
Tim, how big a political story is this? I mean, clearly it was notable the other day, last time that this motion came forward, and dozens of Labour MPs defied the whip, and Keir Starmer lost 10 front benches. I mean, ultimately, is it going to make any difference to Keir Starmer's chance of becoming Prime Minister?
I think probably no is the answer to that question, but at the same time, it has an impact in two ways. I think this is an emblematic issue now for so many people, particularly as we're seeing with some of these by-elections with the Muslim vote in some of these towns. That's a big deal. I mean, I guess it's possible it could affect the outcome of a few seats. Labour's support amongst that community is obviously dropping over the last few weeks. But it's also become a classic sort of Westminster argument that has literally zero bearing on the events concerned, and
Which is a rerun of sort of Rwanda amendments. You just change the word, Rwanda to Gaza, and it's just the same.
I don't want to, belittle the effect on either side of this, and there are obviously points on both sides, as there always are in the Middle East. But this is just a Westminster talking shop load of nonsense, frankly. It makes no difference to British policy, as Sunak has made clear, and it makes absolutely no difference to either the people of Gaza or the people of Israel what the House of Commons has to say about this matter. And yet the heat and bad feeling that is generated can have quite the knock-on effect in terms of internal party dynamics and the rest of it. And I think has much more impact internally than it probably does with the public at large, who have a pretty pragmatic view of all this, which is that terrorists shouldn't go around slaughtering innocent people, and people shouldn't then, in response, go and kill a lot of innocent children. It's not a difficult position to share both of those things, but in Westminster, you appear to have to take one side or the other.
Yeah, I was speaking to a shadow minister yesterday who said it felt heat-wise within the Labour Party similar to in 2016, and that the fear among some of their colleagues was that the heat would just rise so much that there'd be just so much pressure on them, and people wouldn't be feeling hugely safe, and it wouldn't be the best place to be having a debate like this. I think you heard just then as well, did you hear over Flynn someone shouting, "You're dividing us, you're dividing us." The SNP coming under some pressure now for why, when the Labour amendment bears such close resemblance to the SNP one, they want to push forward with this vote anyway. On to the second one. Can I move on to our next question? This is Siobhan Bailey, the Conservative MP. It's an interesting question because it touches in part on this question of deepfakes and digital accuracy and safety. Of course, CCHQ, the campaign wing of the Conservative Party, has been under some flack for that slightly edited clip of Sadiq Khan last week where he misspoke, but his correction was not included in the clip that was...
Which became an issue on Sunday morning, Friday morning, Saturday morning. Callum MacDonald speaking to Richard Holden and said, you edited the clip, and he said, no, it was clipped, not edited.
And Callum said, I work in radio.
I work in radio, I know. I work in audio production, was how he said, very badly described whatever it is that we're doing. Anyway, let's go to the House of Commons and take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, now we've legislated to give the public ID verification options on social media. Tech companies know the safety value and popularity of this because they offer it now, but for a big fee every month, and it's not good enough. Bereaved parents are campaigning for more measures to protect kids online. Fraudsters are routinely exploiting fake social media accounts to scam, and fears of global political interference in elections from faceless, traceless bots are creating the perfect cyber storm. Will my right honourable friend use his influence to get tech companies to get on with offering robust, visible and free verification measures as soon as possible to keep people safe?
Well, can I start by commending my honourable friend for her work on this issue? And she's absolutely right that user verification can be a powerful tool to keep people safe online. The Online Safety Act, as she knows, requires companies to offer all adults optional user identity verification. Companies will also need to take firm action to improve safety for children in particular, and Ofcom will be able to monitor tech companies and have strong powers to ensure they comply. But I can tell her that the Home Secretary is meeting with the industry on Monday next week and will be sure to raise the points that she has mentioned today.
Interesting, that.
Yeah, it's, I think, a very live question, given that it's election year. And there was a photo that was circulating, I think it was just today, of Keir Starmer with Jimmy Savile, which was not a real photo. It was a fake photo. I think they'd transposed Jimmy Savile onto a picture of Keir Starmer with Gordon Brown or something like that. But this is definitely something that we're seeing with increasing frequency. And it seems like Cleverly is going to raise this come next week, and that hopefully we might see some sort of regulation or solutions to why this keeps coming up with increasing frequency.
Very good. Very good. Anything else?
We've got John Hayes. Should you like him?
Oh, John Hayes.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. Friend of Suella Braverman.
Yes.
The power behind the throne.
He the last time he was on, he accused me of being part of the establishment and then conceded that I wasn't. So
that sounds like exactly the kind of stoic kind of determination which has seen John Hayes become a very important figure.
Big fan of hedgehogs. Is this about hedgehogs?
I'm afraid it's not about hedgehogs, but
he spoke
have a
to me
listen.
at some length. The last time I was in Portcullis House, he spoke to me at some length about his love of hedgehogs.
Does he have hedgehogs?
Yeah. We don't have time to go into it now.
We don't have time. We've got a very important question to get into.
He's got a little metal ornamental hedgehog on a chain, which he keeps in his jacket pocket and pulls it out.
Okay, well, here he is talking
about...
about...
good luck charm that got him to the cabinet and made him Foreign Secretary or something.
Great, well, we've got him with some William Blake now, so have a listen.
Great, of course it is.
John Hayes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Britain's food security, compromised by cheap foreign imports, now faces a parallel threat. All kinds of industrialisation in the countryside, from large solar plants to interconnectors and substations, and now to huge pylons covering 87 miles of countryside. These will blot the landscape and use up valuable growing land, filling the Fenland big skies. Knowing that his bow burns with gold, like my own, will he ensure that he joins my fight for our green and pleasant land and make sure that food security and energy security are not competitors?
My honourable friend raises an excellent point about our food security. We have taken steps that he has supported the government in doing to protect prime agricultural land from large-scale solar developments, which I know will be warmly welcomed. But also, our announcements this week at the NFU conference demonstrate our support to increase our country's food security, backing farmers with more funding, enhancing their productivity to produce great British food. All of that, as he knows, and including our green and pleasant land, we put at risk by the party opposite. Not only do they not want to back our farmers, they also want to impose top-down planning targets which would concrete over the countryside that he and I both love.
was like someone took a load of sort of jingoistic nonsense and fell it into an AI bot. Just fed, like, then spat it out. Is he now against electric pylons?
I don't know, but I mean, I've heard Rishi Sunak talk about interconnectors and the need to, actually link up all the new energy generation with the communities that need it, and how important that infrastructure is. And I believe Downing Street boasting greatly that the last budget made that more straightforward. And here we are, pandering to John Hayes. I mean, obviously, Richmond, North Yorkshire is a green and pleasant land.
I was there only last week. It's very nice.
I mean, as someone who grew up in Lincolnshire, Mr. Hayes represents the flat southern part of it. That there are more green and pleasant parts of this nation than that.
Then are you coming out?
I grew up. No, I grew up on the hilly bit in the middle.
Oh, right.
And we would go down to the sort of barren wastes of Holland and the Deepings
to look at the hedgehogs.
And think what would really jazz this place up would be some wind farms or some pylons, frankly. But there we go. Anyway, I slightly jest. Mr. Hayes is fighting for his constituents as only he can.
Quite right too.
But interesting though that the Prime Minister feels the need to sort of pander along instead of saying, "Shut up, you silly little man." Which is what he would like to have said to John Hayes
at many times
over the last year.
Oh, well, there we are. Well, thank you for that, Lara. That was great. Really good. Come on, we need to pick up the energy levels. Come on.
I thought I had.
You have a bit. Right, very good. That brings us to the end of PMQs Unpacked. And thank goodness for that. What time will the email be out, Lara? It won't take you long to write, will it?
Or 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
Perhaps before.
Oh, go on. Try 1:45.
I
reckon you'll pull it.
In your inboxes, Lara Spirit. As a Time subscriber, just go to the times.co.uk/red box and you can have Lara's analysis of the last 45 minutes, should you need it. Up next, we'll play Can You Get to... I mean, as in, because it wasn't a great 45 minutes, not because your analysis won't be worth it. God, up next, we'll play Can You Get to number 10? And after the sad news of the death of Ewan McIntosh, who played Keith in The Office, we'll revisit my interview with him a couple of years ago. I will do that next here on Times Radio. It's Matt Chorley in association with Revolut. You can download the free app, 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Henry Bonsu, tomorrow night from 10 on